Hi everybody. I hope you had a nice holiday weekend. It was very, very beautiful. Lots of sunshine. We are on our last 2 days of school. So you are 2 days away from finishing the weirdest kindergarten year ever. So today is not my last video. Tomorrow will be. Today I picked a book that I'm going to try really hard not to cry in because it's a really very touching story. It's by Patricia Polacco and I've been saving it. We've talked a lot about imagination. I want you to keep that in your mind in this story. Sometimes our imaginations can help us to go places that make us happy when we feel sad, or make us excited when we feel bored, or make us feel more creative when we start to imagine things. It just kind of grows and grows and grows. And this story is about a little boy who feels sad a lot of the time. And then he finds some friends that aren't people, and they become his family. And so you'll get to hear what happens. And it is all imagination. This book is a little bit tricky because the way that it's told is very much like it is nonfiction, like it's a true story. So you have to remind yourself that it is imagined by the author. And it's a good reminder of how even when you feel sad or things are really hard, there are places that you can go in your mind that will help you to feel not so sad and to feel happy and to feel not so lonely. And she does a great job of explaining that in this, but it's very touching. So that's just a little warning for you. I Can Hear the Sun is the name of the story. I Can Hear the Sun by Patricia Polacco. Lake Merritt, a lake right in the middle of Oakland, California, is a magic place for some, a place of rest for others, and home for many a wanderer. Throwaway people, or so they're called, take up on its benches and call it home. Children play near the water while their tired mothers pull heavy air past their faces with paper fans. This is a story about a woman named Stephanie Michelle, a keeper of the animals at the reserve around the lake. She is a person well acquainted with the secret ways of animals and hurting souls that need a place to be. And this is a story about him. So again, it's told like it's a true story, but you just remember that it's not a true story. It's a fiction story. And there's one term on that page that I want you to think about. It said that that this big, beautiful park is a place for people that some people call throwaway people. Well, we know that no one is a throwaway person, but what they're saying is people who don't have homes, don't have friends, don't have all of the people in their lives that make them feel happy and supported and loved, are sometimes hanging out in this park. And she does a really good job of making them feel not so lonely, not so different, not so alone. It started that summer 2 years ago, the one that steamed into Oakland like a thief in the night. It was hot. Children were out of school. For many days, Stephanie Michelle had noticed him sitting there. He didn't smile or talk or play. He just sat for hours and watched the geese. At times, he seemed to be listening to them. Ain't that peculiar, which means different or strange, May Marie used to say as she pushed her shopping cart by him. Still, he began to feel like a regular there at the lake, like May Marie, whose life was stuffed right into that old cart. So she didn't have a home. She just had a shopping cart where she kept all of her things. And Willie Jack, who had been injured many years before, who also didn't have a home. So he spent a lot of time at the park. Child, what's your name? Stephanie Michelle asked him one day. Fondo, he answered. I like that name. Who gave you that name? Don't know. Your daddy? Don't got one. How about your mama? Fondo just looked away. Well, I'm glad you're here. Looking at your face starts my day out just fine, Stephanie Michelle said. Both of them sat for a while and watched the geese together. Looks like you see the same magic in them that I do, said Stephanie Michelle. He smiled for the very first time. I'll be feeding them soon. Would you like to come along? She asked, fully expecting him not to, but he got up and took her hand. At first, he just stood by her and watched, but then he pitched in and helped her clean the ponds and put out feed and grass for the other birds. And then over by the bridge, the boy stopped. One of the geese seemed dizzy and a little unsteady. She's blind, Stephanie Michelle told him. Fondo came close to the little goose. She does all right, except I have to help her find the pond so she'll get fresh water and food. Sometimes I just feed her out of my hand. And she pushed oatmeal right at the goose's beak. She'll fly someday, probably higher and better than all the others. So she's blind, she can't see anything. She just needs a little help now, doesn't she? Fondo asked. Willie Jack passed him. That goose ain't good for nothing, he said. She can't even feed herself. How's she ever gonna fly? Fondo held that little goose and rocked her in his arms. As the weeks passed, Fondo turned up every single day to help Stephanie Michelle. They walked together, ate together, and dreamed together. And so it was, too, that the little blind goose had found a friend. She always seemed to be right at Fondo's side. She hasn't looked that happy in a very long time, Stephanie Michelle said. She makes me happy, too, Fondo said. She makes me smile inside. He gestured to where his heart was beating. Fondo had become such a familiar face there at the lake that even May Marie had taken a great fondness for him, which means May Marie with a shopping cart started to really like Fondo. She fussed over his hair whenever she could, and Willie Jack, who yelled at most people, didn't yell at Fondo. And then one day as the boy was getting ready to leave, Stephanie Michelle said, "Do you need a ride home?" Fondo looked troubled for a split second. "I'll be okay," he said, and he quickly shuffled off through the gate. Stephanie Michelle watched until she couldn't see him anymore, and then she took a long last look at the sun as it sank down on the horizon. "You listening to that sun again, ain't ya?" May Marie asked as she rolled by Stephanie Michelle. "I am," Stephanie Michelle said. "What do you hear the sun say?" Willie Jack asked as he joined them. "It talks to me about the hearts of people and animals, especially the ones that need something or another." "No way, man. No one can hear the sun," said Willie Jack, gesturing wildly as he walked away. "I believe you can, Stephanie Michelle," said May Marie, and then she shuffled off behind her cart to find her usual bench to sleep. Stephanie Michelle sat for a while and listened, and then she put food, which she knew Willie Jack and May Marie would be needing later that night, on the porch of the Science Center, and she went home. The next day, Fondo was waiting at the gate as he did every morning to begin his chores with Stephanie Michelle. They worked hard together, not saying much, but feeling really comfortable with each other. When they finally sat eating their sandwiches, they were surrounded by the geese. "Did you know all these geese have names?" Stephanie Michelle asked as she threw a piece of bread to the big goose. "I know the names," he said, and he gave a little quiet smile. "How? I've never told you, have I?" "They told me." Willie Jack had taken his usual place on the bench. "Uh-huh. They can't talk, and you can't hear them," said Willie Jack. Stephanie Michelle put her arm around Fondo. "I don't suppose you can hear that sun up there too, can you?" "I can," he said, and his eyes got wide. "Well, ain't we a pair?" Stephanie Michelle said. As the park was closing, Stephanie Michelle asked again if she could give Fondo a ride home. And again he said, "No thanks." Before long, Fondo knew the routine of the park better than all the other workers. Stephanie Michelle even gave him an official Parks and Recreation shirt with his name on it. "Because you work so hard," she said. Whatever he did, he was never without that little blind goose. She went everywhere with him. When he was measuring mash to feed the birds, when he was filling the pond for the ducks, she seemed always to know where he was, even though she couldn't see him. "Pretty soon, you're going to turn into a goose," May Marie said to him one day when all the geese were following him. "I wish I could," Fondo said. "No way, man," Willie Jack yelled and scowled. Scowled means he made a grumpy face. The three of them looked up to see a flock of geese take flight with one sweep of their wings, only to circle and settle back on the surface of the lake. We all could fly once, Fondo said. We just forgot how. If we think hard enough, we'd remember. Tell you what, kid, Willie Jack said, you fly, and I'll start believing in something again. Me too, May Marie said as she touched Fondo's cheek, and then she scurried off with her shopping cart. All you gotta do is believe, Fondo called after them. Stephanie Michelle put her arm around him. I heard them talking about leaving soon, he said as he gestured toward the geese. Well, maybe they'll invite you, said Stephanie Michelle, and laughed. But then she looked into Fondo's eyes and she saw that he knew more about flying than anyone else she had ever met. That night when Fondo disappeared through the gate after the park closed, Stephanie Michelle followed him. She watched him walk slowly down Grand Avenue and then turn into the Settlement House building, a place for homeless children, which means children who don't have a home. That's where he lives. Not many mornings after, Fondo met Stephanie Michelle at the gate of the park like he always did, but this time he seemed worried. He wasn't his usual self. I have to go away, he said. He had guessed that Stephanie Michelle had figured out where he lived. Away where? Stephanie Michelle asked. A permanent place for kids like me, a place where I don't have to move anymore. I'm not very good at learning. They call me slow. Oh, honey, if only all of us could be slow like you, Stephanie Michelle said as she hugged him. I failed the tests they've been giving me. They say I'm a special needs case. Oh, child, you're special, all right. The most loving and gentle soul that I have ever known. I love it here. Why can't they let me stay here at the park with you and with them? He said, and he pointed at the geese. The next morning when Stephanie Michelle got to the lake, it was dark and cloudy. She found Fondo standing at the edge of the pond, arms outstretched, eyes looking at the sky above him. He's been like this for hours, May Marie said. It's really spooky. I don't know what it means, said Willie Jack. How long have you been here, child? Stephanie Michelle asked as she wrapped her coat around him. At first he didn't answer. He just kept looking at the sky, and then he said, I'm leaving. I know, said Stephanie Michelle. I tried to talk to a Dr. Patterson last night when I took you back, but it didn't do any good. He said you have to go to your permanent home. Permanent, again, means somewhere where he wouldn't have to move from. He would stay there. No, I'm leaving with them, said Fondo, and he pointed at the geese. They invited me today. Stephanie Michelle pulled him into her arms. Of course they did. Of course they did. She rocked him. The Settlement House people came right to the park and got Fondo. They knew where he would be. He was there all the time. As the day grew to an end, Stephanie Michelle found herself on the bench with Willie Jack and May Marie, just sitting and feeling sad and wishing things could be different. Willie Jack even cried a little bit, probably for the first time in many years. May Marie talked about her sister in Tulsa. She had never talked about her sister in Tulsa. Just then there was a noise in the bushes behind them. It was Fondo. I ran away, he said. Does Dr. Patterson know you're here? Stephanie Michelle asked. Probably by now, but it won't matter, said Fondo. I'm flying away tonight. Oh, Fondo, Stephanie Michelle said. I've let you down. I'm so sorry. But all of the geese are gone. They already left, May Marie said. The lake was empty of geese. There wasn't a single one. So remember that the geese don't stay in one place all year long. They stay in Oakland where it's super hot. That's where they stay in the wintertime, where they can stay warm enough. And then they fly to the south where it gets even warmer in the winter. They stay where it's warm in the winter and go where it's cooler in the summertime. So they migrate. They go for thousands of miles from one place to the other. And so that's what they've done. They think that all of the geese have migrated and have left for the season. And they don't think that any of the geese are there anymore. And Fondo, remember this is all an imagined story, it's all fiction, is saying, I'm going to fly with them. I'm flying with them tonight when the geese leave. And May Marie is saying, oh no, it's too late. They've already gone. And then they heard a sound. In the darkness, at first it was a soft, distant symphony of rushing wind, but it built like a summer thunder, low and deep and grand. Stephanie, Michelle, May Marie, and Willie Jack all squinted to see. The setting sun shone in orange brilliance on the edges of hundreds, thousands, millions of beating wings. It was the geese, more geese than had ever come to the lake, but they were strangely quiet. There was no honking, no calling between them. They circled the lake twice and then 3 times, and finally, as if by command, they glided onto the surface of the lake and shoveled their feet to land on the dark, still water. Their leader swam to the shore. It was the little blind goose. Their leader was the little blind goose. She bowed her head to Fondo, stretched out her neck just as he was reaching out his hand to her. Fondo turned and looked at Stephanie Michelle. "It's time to go," he said. "I know," Stephanie Michelle said. "Keep listening to the sun," he said. And then he smiled at all of them. And as light as a feather, blown by an evening breeze, he simply lifted off from the ground. He hovered there for a fleeting moment, weightless and free, and then he gave a nod to the geese. And with a call from their leader, there was a wild flurry of wings, waves of rushing water, exuberant honks, and they disappeared into the orange sky. So Fondo became able to fly with the geese. And then there was only the sound of May Marie sighing and Willie Jack laughing. The 3 of them vowed they would never tell what really happened to Fondo. After all, who would believe such a thing? The settlement house people, good people, looked for him for a while and then put his name on a list in a file somewhere. But I know this is a true story. It's not really a true story. Because, you see, I know Stephanie Michelle. I see her almost every time I walk around Lake Merritt. She still works right there at the Science Center in the bird sanctuary. You'll know her when you see her. She'll always be with the geese, and she's the one looking at the sky and listening. And that's it. There's one more picture, but the words are not part of the story. But in most books, the dedication is at the very beginning. In this book, the dedication's at the end. It says, "For Stephanie Michelle Benavides, the little blind goose, and Fondo." So the characters in the story are based on real people that Patricia Polacco knows or has heard about, but the story is not true. And again, one of the things that I think about when I read this story is how powerful your imagination can be when things are hard or sad or lonely. You can think of things that make you happy, like Fondo and the geese. They became his family along with May Marie and Stephanie Michelle and Willie Jack. So I hope you like that story. It's one of my all-time favorites, and I've been saving it to the very end because it's a hard one to read. It's so touching. So have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.